Hello, I'm Matthew Jarron, Museum Curator at the University of Dundee and Coordinator of the Public Art Dundee project, and welcome to the latest in a series of virtual public art walks. We're going to do something a little bit different this time. The previous ones that I've done were all using Google Street View, but today we're going to be going along the waterfront, and since we're not actually going on any streets for the vast majority of this, we can't use Street View, so I've taken my video camera out and recorded the whole of the walk, and I'll give a commentary as we go. So we're starting here right at the western end of the esplanade, and we have this very splendid piece called Bridge by Doug Cocker. And this was created in 2006, but it had a rather long and complicated genesis. It originally formed part of a much more ambitious project called Ambassador Routes. And this was a major scheme to try to completely redesign the major routes into Dundee, not just in terms of public art, but in terms of landscape design and road design and new street furniture, and basically create a whole new visual identity to these kind of key ways into the city. It was a massively ambitious project, and they looked to sort of various international companies as well as people closer to home. But ultimately, the whole thing kind of fell apart. It was really, I think, just a bit too ambitious, and nobody could really quite agree on what should happen and how it was going to manifest itself. So in the end, actually, although a small number of minor upgrading works were done, including this, it never really became the massive transformational project that it was intended to be. But this piece was commissioned by the Dundee Partnership initially as part of the Ambassador Routes project as a public art piece to mark this key gateway into Dundee. And originally it was intended to just reflect on the River Tay. And Doug Cocker initially wanted to do the work in bronze, and it was going to have a much more fluid form. I'll actually show you some pictures here, courtesy of Doug, that show some of his original ideas. But then at some point, after planning this out in great detail, it was then decided that it needed to be made in granite. I don't actually know why. And that then necessitated a much simpler and more geometrically precise form. And so instead, Doug came up with this kind of post and beam structure with this cantilever, really to echo the construction of the Tay Bridge, with the curve, suggesting the way the bridge curves at the Dundee end of the bridge. And although it's obviously very strong and should be safely constructed, having this sort of cylinder balanced on top kind of looks like it might fall, and thus symbolising the disaster of the original Tay Bridge. So the end result wasn't at all what was originally envisaged, but it's still a really striking piece and looks great, sort of looking out to the river. Now, before we head off on our way, just want to quickly point out the Bridgeview Station restaurant just near here has this nice old railway carriage outside it, and has a number of lovely sort of painted silhouette heads on the carriage windows, which are rather nice. I don't know who did those, unfortunately. The restaurant opened in 2009, so I assume it was done at that time. Okay, so now let's head on to the esplanade, and we fairly quickly come on to our first piece actually on the waterfront itself, and that is the Tay Bridge Disaster Memorial. Now, you might argue that, of course, Doug Cocker's piece is a memorial to the Tay Bridge disaster, and therefore you don't really need another one, but this is a far more literal one that was commissioned by the Tay Bridge Disaster Memorial Trust, working with John Gray, City Council Public Art Officer. It features a poem that was specially written by Ian Nimmo White, and the stone was cut and engraved by Fife Glenrock. And it features, as you'll see, the names of the various people that died in the disaster. Right, so let's head along on this lovely sunny day and walk on to get to our next piece. So just heading under the bridge here. Okay, here's our next piece, again relating to the Tay Bridge. This was the Centenary monument to mark the 100th anniversary of the original Tay Bridge in 1987. So this was created by ScotRail, and it actually used an original coping stone from the first Tay Bridge. Now on the ground at this point you will see we have some text, and this is what's known as McGonagall's Walk, and it features extracts from the great poet McGonagall's 1878 ode, the railway bridge of the Silvery Tay. Now, one of the things that's particularly interesting about this is that you'll notice at various points the word beautiful is misspelt. Now, there is some debate about this. At the time, this was much decried as a mistake on the part of the letter cutter. However, it was then claimed that this was actually deliberate because that the word was actually misspelt in McGonagall's original manuscript. Now, the thing is that I don't actually know which of these is true, and different people will tell you different things, and I've never actually taken the trouble to look out the original manuscript to find out, if indeed such a manuscript exists, to find out which is actually the case. But it certainly is true that they have replaced at least one of the stones and had the opportunity to spell the word correctly, and they continue to misspell it deliberately. So it is certainly the fact that some of those spellings aren't definitely deliberate now. Whether they were originally is a whole other matter. Now, we're just coming along at this point to the first in a succession of these giant sail poles that stretch in a few batches along the esplanade here. These were made around about 1999 when the first major development works to the esplanade were done. And they were created by the artist Val Fraser working with the company Ironside Farrer. There are now 8, but there were originally 9. I think one was moved to make way for an enlargement of a car park. They were originally printed on canvas, but that deteriorated fairly quickly, and so they were then replaced with perforated steel. So at first they seem quite abstract, and it's only really when you kind of see them with the right light against them. They will look much better in silhouette rather than this way around. So I'll turn around and show you some other images of them. But they can look quite striking if the light, the sort of sunshine is beaming through them. So just a few more of the sail poles here. Unfortunately, I forgot to zoom out at this point, which means the picture goes really shaky. So I apologise, you'll almost certainly get seasick at this point. But thankfully, it doesn't go on for very long. Right, and so here is our final batch of the sail poles. In fact, you can see here where the missing one that used to be was. Okay, we're coming up to another quite significant sculptural piece here. This is called Pathfinder, and it's by the artists Jeremy Cunningham and Paul Grime, made between 2003 to 4. The initial commission came from Scottish Enterprise Tayside, and again was intended as another kind of gateway piece into the city. So it's very much about exploration, and it's got a kind of skeleton of a boat and various objects in it that relate to light and sound and navigation. Now, a couple of years ago, this flood defence wall was put along here, which unfortunately rather spoils the view of some of the pieces, including this rather lovely piece called Lighthouse from 2006 by Adrian McStay. And this piece was designed by McStay, but made by P. Johnson and Company, who are the company that also did all those lovely bespoke metal gates that you see around the city centre. And it's covered in these little glass inserts that McStay also made. Now, unfortunately, there were two people sitting right against our next piece of art when I filmed this, so I had to sort of pause for a while. So this is a plaque commemorating the record-breaking flight of the Mercury in 1938. Donald Bennett made the world's longest flight with a seaplane from Dundee all the way to South Africa. And there have been various different commemorations of this. Originally, there was a large-scale sculpture that was a replica of the tail fin of the Mercury that stood over on grass near where the road bridge used to come in. And that was originally put up in 1988, very hastily, because basically the City Council said, we've got to have something in time for the 50th anniversary. And so it wasn't really constructed very well, and the whole thing fell down almost immediately. And so it was later removed, and then a much smaller plaque, which I think was made in glass reinforced plastic, was put up in 1998 for the 60th anniversary by the artist Tony and Susie Morrow. It then subsequently also got damaged by skateboarders who were kind of skating over it, and it was replaced by this bronze version in 2002. Now, if we just turn round, we'll see this lovely piece here. This is the Alexandra Fountain, also known as the Longair Memorial Fountain, and this was made in 1908. And was donated to the city by the Lord Provost, William Longair, to commemorate visits by Princess Alexandra. Now, she'd boarded the royal yacht at the nearby Craig Pier. And so to mark the fact that she had set foot on Dundee soil, which was not that common an occasion for a member of the royal family, they decided to mark this great event by erecting this fountain. Now, originally this was actually in the centre of an avenue of trees that were in line with the north facing of the Tay Ferries building on the Craig Pier, which is at the eastern end of the esplanade. It has been slightly moved, and obviously the avenue of trees are now long gone. But it's also part of a wider scheme to create drinking fountains throughout Dundee that was led by a chap called J.C. Smith, and so he funded quite a number of them, but it was the Lord Provost that funded this one particularly. It was designed by the city architect James Thompson, and it's definitely the grandest of all these fountains, most of which no longer survive. Okay, so we're coming around to Discovery Point and the RRS Discovery. And various pieces were commissioned at the time that Discovery Point opened in 1993, including this rather splendid pebble mosaic featuring a compass by Maggie Howarth. That was a Dundee Public Art Programme piece funded by Scottish Enterprise Tayside. And originally it was just surrounded with these bollards that you can see here, but then at a later date, in 2001, it was decided to replace 4 of the bollards with these little penguins that were constructed by Tim Chalk. One of the things that he was specifically told was they didn't want to have a health and safety disaster by having the penguins' beaks sticking out and having some member of the public impaling themselves on them. So that's why the penguins are all with their heads down and their beaks definitely not protruding. Further round, we have another of the pieces created at the time Discovery Point opened. This rather splendid railings here with this kind of wonderful spray from the bow of a ship design. These were by David McClelland, and he also did the little globe that's on the finial on the top of Discovery Point that you can see here. Both of these funded by Scottish Enterprise Tayside. Okay, now if we just head along here, so on the hoarding here, we will see a temporary piece. Well, it's been temporary for 2 years now, so hopefully it'll be temporary for a little bit longer. This is by Martin McGuinness and Fraser Gray, and it was actually created on a different hoarding on the road between the railway station and Slessor Gardens, but was then moved here within just a few weeks, actually, of its creation. And I think the V&A paid for it to be moved here. And we'll come on to see some more of McGuinness and Gray's work in a moment. So now let's head back down to the waterfront. And worth just pointing out that where this big building site is here, there's going to be a whole new development, including a little beach apparently. But as part of this is going to be a massive whale sculpture to be created here. So watch this space. That should be getting developed over the next few months, years. I'm not actually sure. It's quite an ambitious project. Don't know quite how long it's going to take. So we saw earlier lots of different artworks commemorating the Tay Bridge, and now we have the monument to the Tay Road Bridge. So this was created by the Tay Road Bridge Joint Board to mark the completion of the project in 1966, and its form is obviously based on one of the legs of the bridge. And there's actually a larger version of the same form over at the north end in Fife. So it's just got various names of all the people involved in the project. Now here's another temporary piece on one of the hoardings, and this again has actually moved. It was originally further west and has been moved over here as construction has proceeded. So this piece was created just earlier this year in 2020. I think it was the last piece of public art to be made before lockdown kicked in. This was created by the artist Adam Milroy, and it was a community project organised by the City Centre and Harbour Community Council. And because it's on the National Cycle Route, it was funded by the Sustrans artwork programme. Right, so we're coming up to another of the landmarks on the Esplanade. This is the Telford Beacon. This is an old lighthouse that was designed as the leading light to direct ships into the harbour. It was originally located on the wharf between King William IV Dock and the tidal harbour. And it was built around about 1834 by the harbour engineer James Leslie, and since he had taken advice from the noted engineer Thomas Telford, it was named in his honour when he died in 1834. But in order to draw attention to this piece, this rather nice ground design has been created by John Gray, the City Council Public Art Officer, with these kind of light beams stretching outwards. Slightly odd that they're stretching inland rather than obviously the other way, which is what they would have been, but clearly there isn't any room to put them the other way, so they kind of had to go that way. Anyway, it's a rather nice little quite subtle design. Now we're just going to briefly divert under the bridge to look at this very splendid piece called North South, painted on the pillars here. This again is by Martin McGuinness and Fraser Gray. And this is a really splendid development, I think. This area always used to be rather sort of dark and dingy and always a bit dodgy. And it's been really brightened up and, you know, this really bold design. So the idea is that if you stand in a particular place, you will see either the word north or the word south. I have to say, from this direction, I've never actually quite been able to find the right spot to stand on, but if we head round to the other direction, we'll see, hopefully we should be able to get it. It does include a portrait here of the designer of the Tay Road Bridge, William Fairhurst. And so let's just head round the other side, and hopefully we can get it about right. Let's see, there we go, that's kind of roughly it there. You get the idea. For some reason I always find it really difficult to get that to work on the other side, but one of these days I'll crack it. Okay, let's head back out again. One thing to note before we head back out again, these rather splendid pebble seats are worth noting. There's a few of them here, but there's a whole load more of them outside the railway station. They obviously got a few extras and placed them here as well. They're called Pendine pebble seats, and they're by an artist called Ben Barrell. Okay, let's head under the bridge. And we'll carry on along what's called Marine Parade Walk. So quite a subtle little piece here just to point out. This is called Stitch in Time, and it was created in 2018 by Jeremy Cunningham, working with blacksmith Jim Whitson. And so it's really to mark the fact that there used to be a sail-making yard just near here, and so it's obviously got a needle and thread theme, but it's just quite nicely done. And now here we have, I think, one of the great masterpieces of public art in Dundee. This is the wonderful piece Panmure Passage by Marion Smith, created in 2009. And this was commissioned by Dundee City Council and the Unicorn Property Group. It's a percent for art piece, and it's installed on the site of the slipway where the Discovery was built. And so the kind of interior negative forms are based on the sections of the Discovery. And Marion was particularly inspired about the story of the Discovery getting trapped in the ice. And she specifically chose granite that was as pale and ice-like as possible, and it kind of sparkles like ice as well. Apparently it arrived as one great 27-ton block and then got cut into 11 separate slabs at Fife Glenrock and was then sculpted individually by the artist. And she actually worked directly from the original plans of the Discovery that are held by Dundee Heritage Trust. Okay, we're going to be heading inland now and come up to Victoria Dock. And another, of course, of the great landmarks of Dundee. This is the HMS Unicorn. And what I want to particularly point out, of course, is the rather splendid carved figurehead on the front of it. Now, the Unicorn is one of the best preserved wooden-built ships in the world, but the figurehead is not the original. It has at various times been replaced over the years. This particular version was made in 1993 by M.W. Stevens of Blair Gowrie, specifically two people, Alex Ramsey and Mike Proven. It's a fiberglass replica. They did actually also restore the older figurehead, which is kept safe inside the ship. But they obviously decided to have a replica on the outside. Okay, let's head over to City Quay. One rather odd thing to note here are the many bearded faces that appear on all the drain pipes. Slightly odd little intervention there. So these were presumably made by, and are actually believed to be portraits of, although this seems somewhat improbable, the harbour engineer David Cunningham. They would have been made around about the 1870s when this whole area was laid out originally. Right, well, we're getting near the end. Just two more things to show you. First of all, this rather oddly placed First World War memorial bench. This was added in 2019, made by AS Fabrication. But it's really odd to stick a First World War bench right next to a Second World War memorial. It just kind of seems rather badly placed to me. And our final piece to look at is another major piece. This is the submarine memorial called Still on Patrol by Jeremy Cunningham and Paul Grime. And this was funded by Unicorn Properties. And so an international group of submarines operated out of Dundee during the Second World War. And so it was thought to be really important to commemorate this very important submarine base here. So the central stone has these 6 windows that are in the shape of the 6 submarines that were lost during the war. And there are 6 panels on the side that list the missing submariners. And then there's also a 7th panel that names men who were delivered to Norway on operations by submarine but were captured and executed by the Gestapo. Okay, so that's as far as we are going to go just now. Obviously, one could carry on walking through the dock area and then on to the footpath along to Broughty Ferry, and there are some more artworks along there, but that's a bit too far to go today, so we'll stop there. Hope you've enjoyed that, and look out for more public art walks coming in the future. Bye for now.